Another online tasting. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with two wonderful Burgundian winemakers, but I have to go through some house rules before we start. So if you'll bear with me for a few minutes. First thing to say is that we're going to be videoing the session. You don't need to be concerned. We are only going to be videoing the speakers. So you can leave your cameras on because you won't be videoed. We will have everyone on mute apart from the speakers, which is myself and Antoine and Thibaut. We will have a break after the second wine just for 2 or 3 minutes so that you can top up your refreshments of water and nibbles and so on. There'll be a Q&A session at the end, but you're more than welcome to use the chat facility as we go through the tasting with any questions at all that you have. And don't worry if I don't appear to have missed your question. We have the wonderful O'Brien's team in the background who have my back and are making sure that I remember to answer all the questions and to remember to ask Antoine and Thibaut the questions as we go along. The best view in terms of the evening's tasting is the speaker view, if you want to have the speaker view. And then please don't forget to eat and drink throughout the tasting in terms of responsible consumption for alcohol. And also just to mention that your wines can easily be recorked and kept in the fridge quite comfortably for 2 or 3 days to keep them fresh, and they'll still be drinking nicely at the weekend if you wanted to continue to enjoy them at the weekend. And then finally, we'll be sending an email link tomorrow with the wines again and with the video from this evening. So if you are not able to come and enjoy the tasting this evening, or if you would like to watch the tasting again, then you will be able to do so on YouTube. So I think that's everything that I'm supposed to remember, hopefully. So without further ado, we'll move on to the tasting. And as I said, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined this evening by two wonderful Burgundian winemakers. Thibaut and Antoine are both growers and winemakers. So they're managing their own vineyards and they're also making their own wines. Two very passionate individuals. They're very firm friends, and in fact, they travel all over the world, showing their wines at various wine fairs and meeting up with their customers. And I was asking them today in COVID times when they last actually physically saw each other, that actually happens to be last week. So they see a lot of each other, firm friends, great farmers, winemakers, and both from award-winning wineries and from different Burgundian villages, but both with a history in the region. So before we start the tasting, and you're very welcome to start on the first wine if anyone wanted to have a taste of the first wine, which is the Seguin Manuel Montagnier, is where we're starting this evening. But before we start, Thibaut, would you mind giving us a bit of background, your family background? You're obviously, your family owns Chanson in Beaune, which O'Brien's also stock, but you set up this wonderful company of yours in 2004. Could you give us a bit of background?
Yes. So first of all, good evening, Ireland. I'm very pleased to be with you tonight. And it's true, my family and O'Brien's is a very long story because my father started to work with O'Brien's more than 40 years ago. So it was really the beginning of O'Brien's. At that time, there were maybe 2 or 3 stores. So, you know, things are changing. And life has changed also in Burgundy because initially my family was running Chanson and my great-great-great-great-grandfather had founded Chanson in 1750. So this is one of the oldest Burgundy winery. And I've been working with them from 1999 until 2004, because at that time in 1999, the winery's been sold to Bollinger Champagne. And I've been working with them for 5 years. At that time, I was in charge of exports and marketing. But it was a bit frustrating for me not to produce wines. That's why in 2004, I had the opportunity to acquire Seguin Manuel. Seguin Manuel is the name of the previous owners of the actual winery. But Mr. Seguin's son didn't want to take over his father. So that's why in 2004, I could acquire Seguin Manuel and develop my own winery.
And you basically are very focused on organic viticulture and grape growing, Thibaut. That's something that you're very passionate about, isn't it? All of the wines are certified organic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two activities. One of our activities is running vineyards, and all the properties that we run are organically grown, and the wines are certified. This is something that I started. I started this idea in 2004, but then it took time to be implemented. And in 2009, I really became 100% organic, and I waited another 3 years until I go into the certification process, because it's 3 years until you can have the stamp certified that you can put on the labels of your bottle. So from the vintage 2015, our wines are organic certified.
Okay, and so 3 years in conversion, basically.
Absolutely, from 2012 until 2015.
Okay, and if we'll move over to Antoine now, and Antoine took over his grandfather's estate in Saltony, and 10.5 hectares, so small, again, a small property, farming sustainably. But I think the defining feature of your property, Antoine, is that you basically reclaimed old vineyards and old vines was one of the sort of founding principles of the property when your grandfather took over. Is that right, Antoine?
Yeah, it is. So hi guys, hi everybody. It's a real pleasure to be there. A little bit complex because it's totally new for me. Online tasting, it is not really what we are able to do normally. So the history of the estate is a little bit more complex. My grandfather, my grand-grandfather was a very, very small wine producer in Santony, my village. And he was only running maybe 1 hectare, don't know exactly how many. And my father is the guy who really creates the estate. He begins to plant and buy some new plots and work with the original vineyard at the end of the 60s. And he continued to develop this business until 2002 when he gets retired. And in 2003, I began to work on my own. And so with different vineyards, some of them were very old because it was my grandparents or grand-grandparents' vineyard, and some of them were younger because we plant quantities of new vineyards during the 80s and the 90s. So today, as Thibaut explained, I'm working in organic way for years. The first years were 2010, but I've been waiting much more longer than Thibaut before asking for a certification, because we just began the certification process last year, so just before the 2020 harvest. So we will be certified in 2023. Okay. It was very, very important for me to produce in organic way because as a lot of people, as you explained before, we are farmers, so we know what the nature is so important for all of us and for the future. And more than only speaking about nature, the quality of the grapes and then the quality of the wine is totally different when you are working in organic way, organic farming.
Okay. We can talk a bit more about that as we progress. And I think, though, that what we'll do is we'll move on to the first wine, which is Thibaut's Montigny Premier Cru. So if you haven't already poured yourself a glass of the white, please avail of a glass now. And Thibaut, I think the interesting thing about Montigny is that all of the wines are Premier Cru from this village. Is that right?
Lots. There are some Montigny village, but there are lots of Premier Cru in Montigny. It's very consistent population, so they could have most of the vineyards classified as Premier Cru.
And can you explain?
One of the villages with a lot of Premier Cru. Yeah.
And could you explain what Premier Cru is, Thibaut? Just
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to talk about. I think.
You know that Burgundy is a patchwork of various areas, lands, villages, and the same varietal is planted everywhere. So the Chardonnay for the whites and the Pinot Noir for the reds. And these vineyards have been classified in different categories. So the first level is the regional appellation, Bourgogne appellation. The second level is the village wines. So like Montagny is a village. In some particular areas, in some villages where the land has shown some consistency in terms of production, you have some Premier Cru vineyards. So that's the third layer or the third level of appellation, Premier Cru. And on top of that, you have the Grand Cru section. So you have 4 levels of appellations in.
So this is one down from the top quality level.
Absolutely, because you only have 10% of the wines produced in Burgundy are Premier Cru. So it's really the top end of the hierarchy of Burgundies.
And I mean, you have 8.5 hectares, 21 acres of vineyards. How many plots of Chardonnay are you managing as a farmer, a grape farmer?
So the Domaine, our vineyards are mainly red. So 80% are reds and 20% are whites. And whites have 1, 2, 3, we have 4 plots, which is rather small in comparison with the reds, where we have more than 20 different plots.
Okay.
In various locations, you know, as opposed to Bordeaux, where you have one chateau, one property. In Burgundy, a domain in Burgundy is split into many areas most of the time. So it depends on. Then Antoine would probably have a different view from mine.
No, my estate is totally different. Not totally different, but I'm really at the opposite, because I'm running about 75% of Chardonnay. Okay, so during the construction of the estate, my father first and my sister and I after, we work a lot for the development of white Santenay. It is still a very small appellation. It is less than about 50% of the global production of the appellation, but I think I'm still the biggest producer of this appellation in Santenay. So when I'm speaking about biggest producer, we're speaking about Burgundy size, so it's really small. And but it is the originality of the estate, so the overall originality of the Olivier said is, as we plant quantities of new plots during the 80s and the 90s, I'm really lucky to work with big plots, Burgundy side speaking always. So, for instance, 2 of my plots of white plots in Santenay are bigger than 2 hectares, so it's huge for Burgundy.
Okay, so basically, Antoine, you're mainly planted Chardonnay, and Thibaut, you're mainly working with Pinot Noir, which is why I think this is such an interesting tasting. Could we talk maybe about the Montagny, Thibaut?
Yeah, sure.
We'll move
so
on.
I mentioned about the property. So it's a activity, and the other part of our activity is we buy grapes from various areas, including the Chalonnais area. So that's the case of this Montagny in Montagny Premier Cru.
Okay.
Something interesting I should mention initially, in Burgundy, you have the name of the Premier Cru. Our lands have names. So this Montagny is coming from a Premier Cru named Vigne du Soleil. So it means the vines of the sun. The reason is because it's exposed, it's facing east. So you have the sun is really facing the vineyards. So it has given the sun exposure has given the name to the land and to the vineyards itself. And Vigne du Soleil is located on the foothill of Montagny with rather deep soils with lots of clay. I mentioned this because it will give the typicity to the wine. You know, Burgundy is not only a matter of varietal, but also the most important thing is the area where the vineyards are planted. And because of this amount of clay you have in this land, you will see when you try the wines that first of all, it has very concentrated and ripe fruit aromas. So that's the sun exposure, but it has also, it's really full-bodied. And this body to the wine is really coming from the ground and from the clay that is there. So it gives richness to the wine. But also have limestone in the soil, and the limestone will give some finesse, elegance to the wine. And this combination of these two will create the typicity of this wine. So first, when you try the wine, fruit is there, it's full-bodied, it's rich, you have summer fruit, and the vintage 19 was a very sunny vintage. And then when you taste the wines, the freshness is there, the freshness from the soil, which gives also lots of length to the wine. And what I like in Montagny is there are wines you can enjoy for aperitifs, you know, they are very easy, expressive wine. You can enjoy them drinking as they are, but you can also pair them with lots of type of foods, you know, including white meats, cheeses. So that's a wine that is you can pair with many kind of meals too.
Okay. And in terms of the age of these Chardonnay vines, I mean, how old are your vines in Montagny?
These are roughly 40 years old.
Okay,
vines,
so really
rather...
that's adding to the concentration of the flavors and so on, because you've got lovely mature vines in that vineyard.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's generally speaking, our vineyards, generally speaking, the average age of our vineyards is 50 years. So we have plots that are, the oldest are 90 years old. And we have a plots, for instance, this year that we are replanting. But we maintain, the age of the vines is maintained old, because we think that it participates in the quality of the wines, the age of the vines.
Interesting. And it's quite interesting because this is 2019, so reasonably useful Montagny. And then moving on then, if everyone wanted to try Antoine's Centenay, because this is a 16. So we've got the wonderful chance here to try different villages. But the thing here that's going to be quite interesting, also obviously 100% Chardonnay, but the difference that the bottle age makes to the wine style. So Antoine, would you mind to talk us through the Centenay? We can't, Antoine, you're muted, I think. We can't hear you. Antoine, we can't hear you. If you unmute yourself. Do you see a small microphone in your screen? If you maybe click on that, we should be able to.
I send him a message.
Oh, that's it.
Ah, perfect, perfect. I was worried there.
Sorry. I've made a mistake. Just because I was, I've got a little throat. So it is only really cold, nothing else. So yes, I was listening to your comment about the Thibaut wine, and as you explained, the white wine you're going to taste is 16. So my target when I'm producing some whites is to produce some medium to long aging white wines in Burgundy. You know, Burgundy white wines are really able to age for a long time, sometimes depending on the appellation or vintages. 16 is really not the vintage for a long aging. So this one is about 5 years old, and it begins to taste really, really good. and very nice. So I'm not sure it's interesting for you to keep this one for a long time. It is really the wine for this spring or next summer or next winter, but you don't have to wait for a long time before testing this wine. 16 was a very ripe vintage because of the summer was very fine with a good balance between rain and sunny days and warm temperature, high temperature. So it was very interesting. And the wines are rich. The wines are really pleasant, a little bit less acidic or nervous as I'm producing usually. So that's why this one is really interesting to taste right now. And it could be a very interesting one for just on its own for aperitif or for very simple lunch. But because it is Santonnet Biévaux, and this plot is very interesting, it is very interesting to pair with a lot of different food. This style of wines are able to be paired with a lot of different style with charcuterie. I don't remember the word in English, so sorry.
Cold meats.
So with fish, with poultry, it is very interesting to have this one to taste with a lot of different wines. White Santonnet and lots of Burgundy white wines are able to be paired with all your dinner, really.
Antoine, would you mind just sitting a bit closer to the microphone?
Oh, sorry.
Perfect, thank you. You mentioned the Santonnet Biévaux, so I think it would be a good time to talk about terroir. Actually, French concept that, of course, is everyone now around the world talks about terroir, but to be honest, it's I think in France you absolutely are able to talk about it in spades, and I think Burgundy in particular can definitely talk about terroir. So it would be interesting to hear your definition of terroir and then maybe talk a bit about Biévaux.
Yeah, so terroir, as you mentioned before, terroir is a French word without any translation in any languages in the world. So because this word is, and Thibaut, I'm sure you're gonna help me, terroir is the combination of geology, what is the word? So the weather, the microclimate, the climate, and the micro animals or vegetables, and all these details. So it is very complex to speak about terroir, and but basically, and the most important thing is soil and subsoil and microclimate. These 2 points are you can change them when we're speaking about a lifetime. But so this is the most important thing. And as we are working only with one grapes, Chardonnay or Pinot Noir, all the differences people can taste when they are tasting some Burgundy wines from the same producer or from different producer, all these differences came from the soil, really. The soil, subsoil, microclimate, so everything comes from terroir. And Biévaux is a very specific one. It is the only plot with this geology in Santonnet because there's 2 big folds on each side, on the east and the west side of the plot. And it is really dedicated to Chardonnay. So my father planted some Pinot Noir during the 70s. I don't remember exactly when, but what I remember is that I've changed from Pinot Noir to Chardonnay in 2012 because the quality of Pinot Noir was always really basic and not really interesting. And it was a very hard job to produce a medium quality Pinot Noir. And since I've planted some Chardonnay with always the same work, but the quality of Chardonnay is really at its best. And Biévaux, I consider that Biévaux is maybe the best plot for Chardonnay in Santonnet, but the main reason is because I'm the main producer of Biévaux.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to let you see a few of the comments that's coming in. From James Hannigan, he said he went to visit Thibaut when he was last in Burgundy after speaking to him at the O'Brien's Wine Fair, and he loves the wines. We had recommended.
Thank you.
We did recommend. I had to be very Burgundian and recommended Gougère for the matches with the wines tonight, guys. And someone's just saying that they've just made gougere straight from the oven, and it's a fantastic match with the whites. So that's nice.
Wow. Great.
And then someone else is having chicken drumsticks, which I'm sure is also absolutely delicious. I think that proves your point, Antoine, that the wines go with all types of food. Someone else is saying that the Montigny Premier Cru with the very cheesy little scone from Old Street Restaurant in Malahide is absolutely delicious. So we've got a few comments coming in. Thibaut, I'm interested to hear your interpretation of terroir as well, because it's such an important part of the philosophy of grape growing and winemaking in Burgundy. So I think it's at the core of the region. So it would be really good to hear your interpretation.
My definition is similar to what Antoine said. It's a terroir is a microclimate. I think there is another thing that is important. A terroir is not necessarily something natural. There is another dimension to the terroir, is what the human being has done on it. And you have to imagine Côte de Beaune or the Côte de Nuit, and in the Middle Ages, these were planted with bushes and with trees, and so the vineyards that you can see now have been come from the hard work of people here, and the terroir that we have given boundaries to come from our experience, and we have seen some consistency from a block to another one. And we have removed the stones, human beings have removed the stones from an area to build walls to. So I think the human aspect is also key to the definition of terroir.
And also surely the winemaking in the cellar, the type of oak, those decisions that the winemaker has made is surely part of the overall terroir influence in a wine, that the hand of man, if you like, is part of terroir.
Yeah, that's right. But I would say that terroir is what is given by
nature,
the nature and the vines. And then as a winemaker, you just give an interpretation of the terroir. If Antoine is making the same wine as me from the same vineyards with his own technique and winemaking and the style of wines he develops, in the end, we would have two different wines, even if they come from the same terroir. Okay.
And Antoine, you mentioned that climate, vintage, as well as soil and subsoil and the microorganisms within the vineyard and so on are part of terroir. Obviously, we've had frost this year, quite widely spread across France. Were you affected at all with the frost, Antoine?
Yes, and mainly for the Chardonnay, because
really?
16 was the last big frost in Burgundy. So we had a big frost in 16. It was the 27th of April, and it was late, and so the consequences were huge. Okay, so this year, 2021, we've got some frost at the beginning of April, but so we don't know exactly what will happen for the next harvest. So we know we have lost some grapes. We don't know exactly how many. Is it 50%? Is it 80%? I hope not. Okay, but it is too early to know exactly what will happen for the next harvest. So we have to wait a couple of weeks, or maybe 3-4 weeks, don't know exactly, to know, and we will be able to see exactly how many grapes we could expect if we don't have any more problems since the harvest. Okay, because the season is long, and because of frost, we're going to harvest at a normal date. We don't know exactly when, but it will be in September this year instead of last year where we begin the harvest mid-August. So it's really early. We're sure we have lost a part of the 2021 vintage, but I'm really not able to say how many percentage we have lost. Mostly for Chardonnay, because Chardonnay began to grow earlier than the Pinot Noir, so it will be the worst place. So we were working this afternoon in another terroir, white terroir in Santenay called Sous la Roche. And today we're able to see about 1/3 of the buds growing normally. And the two other thirds are still waiting.
Okay, still behind really, just quite late.
Yeah.
And
So,
what about you? Did you have a frost impact here?
Are you talking to me, Lynne?
Yeah, sorry, Thibaut, did you have frost?
Yes, I confirm that we've been affected as well. Probably not in the same proportion as Antoine, because we produce more red. We grow more Pinot Noir than Chardonnay. Chardonnay's been much more affected than Pinot Noir. But as Antoine said, in 2016, we had also bad frost. And we have a bit changed the way we grow our vines since then. And I think that maybe it has a bit limited the impact of the frost. But we will know in a few weeks. It's a bit too early to say. But we have to adapt to this new situation because, you know, it's just a consequence of the global warming. We are farmers and we really see in 10 years huge changes in the climate. We see the impact of this global warming. It means that the spring is coming earlier. Usually now it starts in March, but then we can have frost. And we will face this more often, we think.
And I suppose if you late pruned or something, does that help you?
Sorry?
If you pruned late, does that help?
Yes, that's what we do. We prune late and we don't tight. I don't know the word in English, but the branches we don't bend them, tight them. So we wait as long as possible, end of March, beginning of April, to do that, and then it will late the process. You know.
Okay. And listen, I'm just going to give a few more questions here. Someone else is eating fresh gougere, which I'm delighted that people have actually those. Someone else is having smoked salmon with the Santenay, and it's a fantastic marriage. And mushroom risotto is also going well with the wines. Someone is asking how long we keep the wine in barrels. So I think we're going to answer that after the break. And there's a Drogheda joke here, which I'm going to leave for the chat room. Why is Chardonnay more affected by frost? Is because it buds earlier, basically. The Pinot Noir buds are closed longer, so they're not so affected by frost. They would be, depending, but Chardonnay buds earlier, which is why it's been affected. And someone else said, hi, Camilla, Chardonnay begins to grow earlier than Pinot. Buds were bigger and more fragile and impacted by frost. Exactly, thank you. Both white are Chardonnay, yes, taste so different and distinct. So why are they so different? So you've got different vineyards, you've got different ages. Guys, I'm going to let you answer why the wines are so different.
Yeah, it is. We try to, the reason, we explained all the reasons just before. And the first of all is just because, as I remember, the Montagnais is 19, is it? I think so, yes. And the Santenay is 16, so it makes a huge difference. And as Thibaut explained before, if we were able to work with exactly the same grapes, we could not be able to produce the same wines. So the style, the quality and the characteristic of our wines will be very approach, very similar. But because of our way of vinification and barrel aging, etc., so our style of vinification, the wines will taste differently at the end.
Thibaut, do you want to add anything to that?
Maybe even if you said that we would answer the question after the break, the winemaking is different for our two wines. The vintage 19, so the wine's been fermented and matured in oak casks for 1 year, and so it's not only fruit you have in the wine in the end, but the fact that the wine is aged in barrel will add another dimension to the wines in terms of aromatics, like the vanilla or the toasted character that is coming from the oak. and from the maturation in oak, fermentation in oak.
Okay, well, listen, I think that's a good place to take a break just for a couple of minutes to let people top up water or nibbles or gougere by the look of things. I'm feeling quite now because I don't have any.
So Lynne, let's drink.
Exactly, there's always that.
Cheers.
Cheers. So we'll be back in a couple of minutes to continue on with this fantastic tasting, and fascinating to have you both with us. So we'll be back with the Pinot Noir in a couple of minutes. So we'll continue on then with the tasting, and we're now going to move on to Antoine's Pinot. But before we do that, actually, there's a question just come in about the on the barrels. So do the barrel sizes for fermenting vary between the two wines, or is it the bottle aging that increases the intensity of the oak in the Santenay? By the way, both wines are delicious. So the barrel size affecting the difference between the two wines? Antoine?
Not only the barrel size, but you know, it is maybe so complex, and maybe more complex to speak about barrels than wines. There are so many different types of barrels. There are so many different types of oaks. There is some terroir for oak tree, and the characteristic of the oak we will use to build and to make the barrels will give other characteristic to these barrels. And after there's two very important points when we're speaking about barrel. The two most important things is the original oak, if it comes from France, from East Europe, from US, anywhere else. And the second thing, very important, is the toasting of the barrel. Maybe you know, to give the ovoid form of the barrels, it needs some heat in it. And the quality of eating, the quality of toasting will give some very specific characteristic to the barrels. And at least, as you mentioned before, the size of the barrel is totally different, because the surface, the contact surface between the wine and the barrel, and at the end with the air, is different when we are using some big barrels or Burgundian traditional barrels. So I'm using both. For whites, I'm using about, depending of the wines, but for the white Santenay it is about between 15 to 20% of big barrels, 350 liters, and so 80% of traditional 228 liters barrels. And for the reds, I'm only using some classical Burgundian barrels. Is it okay for you? Do you need more information? Maybe Thibaut, you have something to explain more about barrels?
No, it's the same for us. For the Montagny that you've tried, for instance, it's matured, fermented in 228 liters casks, which is the normal size of casks, but a part is also bigger casks. We have 300 liters. Because as Antoine was saying, the contact surface, the wine with the barrel is different depending on the size of the barrel.
So the
wound will be different depending on the size of the barrel.
So the bigger the barrel, the less wood effect, essentially, isn't it?
Yes, and I've read the question.
The less the impact will be.
So I've read the question about the oak taste and the oak flavor in my wine. So it is mainly, it's not only oak flavor or oak taste you can have in my wine. It is mainly what we call reduction taste. So, you know, there's two different states of the wine: oxidation, that is very bad for Burgundy wines, and reduction, because the wine was made with low quantities of oxygen and very small contact with the air. So, and Biévaux naturally gives this style of taste a little bit toasty. It smells like yes, roasted nuts or something like that. So we are able to have the same taste if we were producing this one in vat. So the barrel is more what is the word, to support the natural flavor of the wine. So it's not oak taste you mainly tasting in the Centenay, white Centenay. It is more natural flavor of the wine and reduction flavor and taste.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to move on in the sense to the Centenay Pinot Noir. Antoine, the Temps de Cerise. This is the wine number 3. And can you talk to us about this the very one?
So this is you know, Centenay is one of the it is the third appellation the third bigger appellation in Côte d'Or. The 2 first one are Thibaut, Gevrey, Chambertin, Meursault, I think so. And there's a lot of different terroirs in Centenay. So this wine, there is a joke on the name of this wine, but mainly for French-speaking people, there is a joke between the name of the wine is Le Temps des Cerises, so cherry time in English. But we have made joke with crisis and cherry. So in French, crise is crisis and cerise is cherry. So the 2 words are really similar, but the signification of the name is totally different if we are speaking about cherry time or crisis time. So you have to choose. So technically, this one, the grapes. The one thing I haven't mentioned at the beginning is I'm working exactly the same way than Thibaut with my own estate, and I'm buying some grapes to friends of mine, mainly in Centenay. And this one is produced with about, it is 18 vintage, so it is 40% of my own grapes, and 60% of grapes I've bought outside. Same quality, as I explained, I'm only working with friends of mine in the village, and but the grapes came from different locations in the village. So it is a global Centenay. It is not a typical terroir wine, as we were explaining before. Okay, so this one is more an average Centenay, a global Centenay. What I'm trying to produce with this one is easy drinking Centenay, easy understanding Centenay. Sometimes people ask us a lot of questions about the Burgundian appellation, the Burgundian terroir. Sometimes it could be a little bit complex for people who want to discover Burgundy wines. So this one is on the opposite, the most simple. So it is a Centenay, 100% Pinot Noir. And this one is really made for early drinking and enjoying. It is what we call in French, le vin de copain. Maybe you can understand it is the friend's wine. The one you can open just because a friend of yours came at the end of the hard job day, and you just want to have a glass together. So this one is very simple. You don't have to mind about what we're gonna eat with it, etc., etc. So easy drinking wine, and we are speaking about vin de soif in French too.
Okay, and in terms of the Pinot, you're saying some of the Pinot Noir grapes are from your friend and some are from you, but you must be working along similar growing philosophies and vineyard management philosophies when you're working with someone in that way, would you?
Yeah. Not all the grapes are organic, okay, but mostly organic. And what we are trying to do in the future, and we will begin it this year, yes, with the new vintage. We try to have a partnership with the producer. So I'm making the farming with my own staff. Okay, so we're able to produce exactly in the same way. So it is sometimes difficult to discuss and to be connected with the owner of the plot. But at the end, it is a winner-winner partnership, really, because we are making our own farming, organic farming. So we know exactly. I know exactly what we are able to expect with these plots, and it is less work for the owner and more easier.
Okay. I'm going to then We have a question. Someone's saying that Taleggio cheese is very good with wines, but there's a question that I'd like to specifically ask you, Antoine, because we tasted your 2016, and someone is asking how age affects a wine. So it would be interesting to hear your description of the change in aroma and flavour profile when wine has been aged.
Thibaut, you want to answer first, or I do?
Oh,
Vas-y, ça t'était destiné.
C'était pour moi. Okay. So basically, at the beginning, it is always the same styles. You have a lot of flower flavors, fruit flavor at the beginning, with a very. I'm only speaking about my wine, but normally my white Chardonnay and my whites, generally speaking, are always a little bit acidic at the beginning because, I explained, I want to produce some medium, long aging white wine. So we need some acidity. And we need this very specific balance we're able to obtain in Burgundy between sugar, so alcohol at the end, and so sugar, acidity, and all the other components. So that's why it is always very difficult to decide the precise moment you have to harvest all your plots, because the quality, the maturity could be different from one plot to another. And because of the organic farming, the balance of all these different components is really easier to obtain each year, even if the weather was, as in 2020, very warm and dry during all summer. The quality and the balance of the grapes at the end is always much more interesting than before when I was working in classical way of farming. So, and years after years, the acidity, the level of the acidity is still the same. Okay, there's not a lot of different, but everything, the aromas, the cream, not the cream, I don't know exactly the word in English, but the cream style of the wine begins to appear, and it gives a very smooth sensation in your mouth. So the acidity is always there. It is like the skeleton of the wine, really, acidity, and all the over flavor and sensation begins to be more and more delicate, more and more pleasant, more and more creamy. So that's why 16 begins to be very, very interesting to be drunk. Today, for instance, my 18 are really too young, even if it is a easy vintage, but it is really, really too young.
And thank you for such a comprehensive answer.
Thank you.
Thibaut, I'm going to move to you. I'll come back to you again, Antoine. Thibaut, can we move on then to taste your Gevrey Chambertin, which is
Yes.
2018. So you might want to start by talking about how you feel age affects your wines.
Gevrey Chambertin, vieille vigne. I will give you a bit of background regarding Gevrey Chambertin because it's like a name in Burgundy. The reason why Gevrey Chambertin is so famous worldwide is because there is a guy named Napoleon, and in a week time we're going to celebrate the 200th anniversary of his death. And the legend says that when he was fighting or going into battlefield, he was always bringing a bottle of Chambertin with him. So it really helped the reputation of the Chambertin and of Gevrey Chambertin area. You know, in Burgundy, when you have double names in the villages, it's the second name is the name of the best vineyard. So in Gevrey Chambertin, the Chambertin, the Grand Cru Chambertin is the best vineyard. But this appellation has a good consistency and its own style. It's located on the Côte de Nuit area, which is supposed to be the Mecca of Pinot Noir, because the soil is different from what it is everywhere else. The age of the stones and of the limestones is much older than what you would find in other areas of Burgundy. And it creates the the special style of Gevrey wines. Gevrey Chambertin wines are spicy wines, full-bodied, rich tannics. They have a great aging potential, but we are talking of the vintage 18. 18 is a warm vintage. We had a very warm summer. The fruit could really ripe very well. So what you have on the nose when you try this wine, you will have the fruit, but you will also find some floral nuances, typical from a good ripeness in a vintage like this. And it's so combined also with the toasted character from the oak. All is together, it's still young, so you can feel all these elements apart from each other. And of course, when the wine is aging, all these elements will integrate into the wines, and you will have, if you are patient enough and if you have a cellar and you can keep the wines, you will have more harmony in the end. So that's why it's worth to keep our wines longer. But in the vintage 18, you really can enjoy the wine now because it's full of fruit, it's rich, it's full-bodied. And as you can, as opposed to the Centenay, which is excellent to drink now, it has potential too. But you can feel that the Gevrey Chambertin is definitely a wine to pair with food.
It's quite, I mean, that's typical of the village though, isn't it? That it's rich, it's full, it's concentrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think like the comment earlier about how different the two Chardonnays were from the two villages and two vintages, but obviously these are incredibly different wines again. And I think it just emphasizes the point of Burgundian terroir and how different it is depending on the different villages and the location of villages. How old is the oak that you use for the Gevrey Chambertin, Thibaut?
There is 20% new barrels.
Okay.
In the case of most of our villages, the village wines we produce at this roughly it's from a vintage Chardonnay, it's between 20 and 25% new barrels.
Okay.
So it means that new barrels, 20%, and the other barrels are 1, 2, or 3 years old.
Okay. And after 3 years, the barrels are sold then because you don't want anything older than 3 years old, is that?
No, we keep our barrels for 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
We mature our Burgundy wines into these barrels.
Okay. And Antoine, how long do you keep your barrels for?
Quite the same.
Similar. Okay.
Depending on the appellation I'm using, for my best appellation is Premier Cru or Pommard, for instance. I'm using barrels only during 3 years, so new barrels 1 year and 2 years old. Okay, for all the other wine, it is to about 20% of each. Okay, so from new barrels to 4 or 5 years old. And as Thibaut, I'm using my older barrel for 2 or 3 years more for my basic wine as Burgundy, whites or reds. Okay. So it is very, very important because the quality of the barrel decreases years after years, and even if you are very careful with the hygiene, what is hygiene? Okay, hygiene. Thank you, Thibaut.
Hygiene.
Years after years, the quality of the wood begins to be different. So it could be very dangerous to keep barrels for too much time.
And how many coopers are you working with, Antoine, in the cellar? How many coopers do you buy from?
How many? Coopers. Okay.
Coopers, yes.
There's two main cooperage in my cellar. So the first one is one of my neighbor in Ruilly, so a small village and very nice appellation in Côte-Chalonnaise, with Stéphane Chassin, a small producer. He's producing few thousands of barrels each year, but it is haute couture barrels. Okay, and I really like the style of these barrels, and it is my older provider for barrels. I'm working with Stéphane Chassin for about 12 years now. And the second one is an Austrian cooperage,
Okay.
And very interesting barrel. The name is Stockinger. So they are making, basically they are making some very big cask, wood cask. Okay, very interesting too, but I haven't tested some now.
Okay.
Maybe my project was to buy some big cask, some foudre for the new
Okay.
vintage for 2021. So I think it will be for the next one
Okay.
because of frost. And it is the barrels are totally different than Stéphane Chassin barrels. The wood came from East Europe, okay, and the quality of toasting is very interesting. So it takes years. Now it is the 5th year I'm using this style of barrel. The 2 or 3 first year were just for test because, as I explained, there's no best cooperage in the world. There's only my best. Okay, because what is very important is the match between the wine and the barrel, and my best barrels maybe are really not the same than Thibaut's barrel, for instance. But I know that these barrels match perfectly with my wines, and they are exactly what I'm expecting from these barrels.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Thibaut, what about you? How many coopers are you working with?
So I have many experiences with various coopers. Antoine said, you really have to find the cooper who stick to the style of wines you want to develop. And I've made lots of experiences, and in the end, the cooper to me, I think is matching with the style of my wines is a French cooper, Burgundian French cooper named François Frère. And all my casks are coming from France. All the trees are coming from France, from French forest, and mainly, yes, from this cooper.
Is he Burgundian, François Frère?
Yes, he's Burgundian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks, because if we could talk all night about oak, but I want to get back to the wine. So we have a question here. If Antoine, are you doing any whole bunch fermentations with the Sanctonay?
Yes, I've made a small answer. I'm totally fond of whole bunches, really, and I'm using for most of my wine more than sometimes 100% of whole bunches for Pommard, for several wines in Sanctonay, and because I really like the quality of the fermentation, the vinification, it is very interesting. So for the wine you have tested tonight, it is only 40% of whole bunches. Okay.
Okay.
And what is important when we're speaking about whole bunches is what we're doing during the vinification. And because of the risk to obtain some green taste, vegetable taste, it is very important to be very delicate and smooth with the grapes during the vinification. So that's why since 2010, I've stopped all the punching down, pigeage in French. So there's no physical, mechanical action of my grapes during all the vinification. We are only using some pumping over twice a day, once a day, depending of the wine, depending of the vintage. But it is a very delicate vinification. And just for joke, I don't know if you remember, Lynne, but you're the only one who said I'm a lazy winemaker, because I tried to explain when we met the first time, I was trying to explain that the best vinification for myself was when we were making the less. And at the end of my explanation, you look at me and you say with a very nice smile, can I say you're a lazy winemaker? So it is still in my brain. Thank you.
That's definitely non-intervention, Antoine.
Yes, I know, but it was a very nice joke.
Okay, someone's asking about decanting the reds. What's the view from you guys on you decanting the red wines?
So it depends on everyone's styles of wine, but I'm talking of Seguin Manuel wine. In the youth, I definitely recommend to decant or open the bottle in advance. And I think that generally speaking, you wouldn't take any risk opening the bottle in advance or decanting the wine. Because then, as Antoine explained to you, that the reduction, so we try not to give oxygen to the wine. So they close down in the bottle. And in order to open the bouquet of the wine, oxygen is something important. And if you decant, you will add a bit of oxygen and then the wine will really develop. I wouldn't say the same for all vintage wines. If it comes to one that is 30, 40 years old, then it can be dangerous and I wouldn't recommend it.
Just pour straight from the bottle into the glass, avoiding sediment.
Absolutely. But then for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old wines, no problem to decant them.
Okay.
And to decant them.
Okay.
It is very interesting to use carafe for whites too. A lot of people are mainly using some carafe for reds, but it is very interesting for young wines too.
Yeah.
Young whites, sorry. So
Yeah.
very, 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 very interesting. And I totally agree with Thibaut. The explanation was the best.
And I also think with even like, you know, an oaked Burgundy and Chardonnay, you know, we've got Santenay and Montagny here tonight, but obviously things like Merceau and so on, they can actually look very, very beautiful in the decanter as well. So I think it helps the aromas and it can help the flavors to have that bit of oxygen from the decanter. But also it looks beautiful at the table, which you don't often see white decanted, but when you do, it just looks so nice. If the wine has got some color and some color from the age and from the oak, it can just look fantastic at the table, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So someone's asking what happens to the barrels after they're used, and someone else would like a barrel sent over to Dublin with a tap on it. Who do you sell your barrels to when they're finished?
They're going to Ireland after being used in Burgundy to produce the whiskey.
Not a bad plan. Not a bad plan. Absolutely.
No, that's serious. And it makes very nice flower pots, really.
Okay. Just another question on aging, because this is a question that's coming up quite a lot. Just wondering, in terms of Thibaut, how long would you keep your Montagny for before you drink it? How long would you keep your Gevrey Chambertin for before you drink it?
For the Montagny, I would say that so you can enjoy the wine now. It's full of fruit. It's a bunch of fruit. It's refreshing. It will be at its best, I would say, in 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And you can keep it for another 2 or 3 years. So all 5, 6 years. That's for the Montagny. It's mid-term wine. For the Gevrey Chambertin, because of its structure, because it's concentrated, because of the tannins and the acidity, this is a wine you can keep if you have a good cellar. You can keep, it will be at its best in 7 years, 5, 7 years, but you can keep it for 10 years, 15 years, if it's well kept.
Thank you. And Antoine, the Santenays, the 16, and obviously the red is 18. So,
16 is really interesting for right now drinking. It is very interesting, and you could age it for 3-4 years more, but not for a long time. It is really not the vintage for long aging. I've got some in my private cellar. I've got some very old Bievaux or more than 20 years old, and still very interesting, depending on the vintage. The whites are much more sensible to the vintage for aging. Reds are able to age. Normally, aged vintages are able to age, but for the whites, because of the acidity level and several details, it is always much more complex. And that 16 is really interesting to be drunk right now. You don't have to wait for a long time.
And the Santenay.
the red Santenay, you know, Santenay, the aging of all the Santenay is very long and very, forget the word, very slow. Sorry.
Okay.
We can compare. I'm just speaking about aging. I'm not speaking about the quality of the wine, but we can compare the aging of Santenay with the aging of Pommard. It is a very long and very slow aging. So I've got some wines from my father, older than 30 years in the cellar, and still very, very interesting. Even from basic Santenay, Village, not Santenay Premier Cru, the same you have tasted tonight.
Okay. Gosh, that's incredible. Which I always consider Santenay like fantastic value, really. It's like a hidden gem within Burgundy, and that's even more so if you're saying that the aging is similar to Pommard, which is that's amazing. Thibaut, a food pairing to go with a Gevrey Chambertin, please. Oh,
I was recommending, I was recommending Magret Canard, duck breast. Because personally, I like it a lot. And I think it's going well with the wine too.
Absolutely. So we've talked about decanting. And someone else has suggested that you can use the barrels to go over Niagara Falls. I don't know if it's...
Irish people are really courageous.
Someone is just asking again about decanting and how you would go about decanting a white wine versus a red wine. And I suppose that's back to the question of, particularly with the red wine, how old the red wine is. Would someone want to maybe you talk about white wine, Antoine, decanting? Yeah. Thibaut can talk about reds because of your split of the grape varieties.
I think it is quite the same for both white and reds. The young wines are always closed and very, very difficult to appreciate, and because the wines spend a long time in barrels with small quantities of oxygen, and when we bottle it with cork, it is very, very protected against oxygen. And oxygen is very interesting to develop and express the real flavor, all the complexity of the flavor and the nose, the nose of Burgundy wines. What is very interesting with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, it is we always begin the tasting with the nose because it is very, very important. And try to do it tonight. It's a little bit late, but the next time you will open a bottle from Thibaut's winery or mine, you just have to, you open the bottle and taste the first glass, just a few seconds after opening the bottle, and wait for 15 minutes with the wine in the glass, for instance. And you could smell much more things and more powerful flavor, etc. So it is the quantity of oxygen you will add to the wine naturally, and without, please don't use any system to force the oxygenation. It is the worst. What is important for wine is time, and always long time to do everything. What we are doing in our cellars, in our winery, what we call aging, is very important to leave the wine express and to leave the nature, make all the combination between all the components of the wine. So what is very important for Burgundy wine is to take time and let the wine live its own life before bottling and before drinking. Each time we are doing anything on the barrels of the wine, any racking or bottling or anything else, the most important thing to do is waiting before tasting the wine, before opening the bottles. So it is the same when the bottle arrives to your private cellar, to your house, to your home. Leave the wine for a few weeks before opening the wines, opening the bottles. And because the wine needs a rest always after a travel, after any operation. It is oh, I'm sorry, I can't read that. It is very hard to hear me. Sorry. So oxygenating the wine is very, very important for the quality of the flavor, definitely.
And if I can add a word for this oxidation matter, I would recommend for the people who've tried the wines tonight, if they still have a bit of wine in the bottle, the bottle until tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and they will see the difference in the wine, and they will see tomorrow the wine will be much more open, the volume will be the wine will be bigger, definitely. So for those who haven't finished the bottle, I would advise this. And this is a general advice is, we don't do it usually, but we experience it as winemakers. We open bottles because we have tastings, and 2 or 3 days after, we try the wines, and the wine is definitely better. It's different, it's much more open and smooth and well integrated. So it's worth doing this experience. That's my recommendation for tonight.
Your recommendation for tonight is to keep some wine, basically, which you will need to be quite disciplined to do that. So a question, what is forced oxygenation?
You know, there's some people sell some system you can put on the top of the bottle, and when you pour the wine in your glass, it makes a lot of bubbles. It is a very complex way to come from the bottle to your glass, and it gives a lot of oxygen in the wine. So it is really not very interesting. It is just because it's called marketing, I think so.
Yeah, and I mean, the wine doesn't need to be shaked. You know, it's like shake wine. So it's not cocktail, it's wine.
Okay, someone's asking which distilleries are sourcing Burgundy in barrels. I don't know that we know the answer to that one. Someone else is asking which major export markets for both of you. So which are your biggest markets that you sell your wine in?
For myself, the two biggest, no, the biggest one is in Belgium, so it's really different. And the other ones are mainly in Europe, so Holland, Netherlands, okay, and after it is in Asia.
Okay, and Thibaut?
Funny enough, my first market is France.
Yeah.
But no, for export, my 5 first markets are the UK, China, Belgium, Ireland, America, the US. Did I say US?
Yes, America.
Oh, America.
And Ireland is among my 5 biggest markets, but a small country with lots of good connoisseurs.
I think it's worth saying as well that we're not talking of thousands and thousands of cases of these wines. When I come to see you and we taste the wines, Antoine and Thibaut, normally I'm asking how many cases I can have. I don't tell you how many I want. I'm saying to you, when you tell me, well, you can have 30 cases of this, you can have 70 cases of that, if I'm lucky, maybe. On this, or you can have 25 cases. In some wines, I know I can have a case. So we are talking, as we said at the beginning, of small plots and small production, artisanal in terms of the scale of the wines. So market size is very relative to the fact that you don't have huge quantities of wine to sell.
Absolutely.
And when I'm working with you, I know that I'm basically, the wines are what we say on allocation. You give me the allocation that I'm allowed, and I have to be eternally grateful. We are very grateful to have them in Ireland, absolutely, in O'Brien's. So someone's asking about which of the wines would go nicely with Nepalese food.
I don't know anything about Nepalese food, so but the white Burgundy.
Neither do I.
Yes, I've traveled a few times, and Thibaut, I think it is the same in Asia, so not really in Nepal, but I think, and I really prefer white Burgundy wines with Asian food. So I don't know anything about Nepalese foods, but white Burgundy are much more able to support the spice, okay, and the taste, the very typical taste of Asian food. And it is much more difficult to pair Pinot Noir with spicy food or sweet and sour, etc. So it is always a little bit complex.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone's asking about a guide to Burgundy. Could either of you recommend a guide to Burgundy for a visit when the pandemic is over? Do either of you know any good books?
Do you know anything, Thibaut, as a tour guide or?
In English, I don't know the best guide, like touristic guide.
Yeah, you know what I'm going to mention, which is worth a read, is Raymond Blake, who's one of our lovely.
Oh yes, Raymond Blake. Yeah,
written,
absolutely.
Raymond is one of my neighbors, you know.
who is a good friend of you both and who lives beside in Sauntony, Antoine. So you should have.
Raymond is living. We're living quite in the same street. So I'm sorry, I forget him.
I think the book is A Hungry Irishman in the Belly of Burgundy, I think is the name of the book. And that's Raymond Blake, and he's a lovely Irish journalist. So I'm going to give a plug to Raymond there.
Yeah, and he knows very well his Burgundies.
Yeah,
he's very knowledgeable.
Apparently Waterford Distillery are using Burgundy barrels. Thank you for that. Someone sent that in. How long can a bottle be open before it goes off? Guys,
it depends on the wine, as I said, and how it's kept. I would say that if the wine is kept in the fridge, it's not ideal, but it's maybe better than leaving the bottle in the room temperature. And I would say three days, not more than 3 days. It depends on the wines.
Someone's asked about Coravan and what your views are of Coravan, the wines, the removing with the needle from the bottle. What do you think, guys?
It is very interesting for us, for instance, when we're making a wine tour with buyers as restaurants in France or anywhere. It is very interesting because you can keep the bottle for weeks because of Coravan. But if we are speaking about drinking a bottle of wine, it is much more easier to uncork it, really. And we don't know how to keep a bottle more than 1 hour and a half.
And my experience with the Coravin is when the level when it reaches a third, the level is a third. Then you get oxidation. So it's nice until the bottle is half, but the wine is changing.
Okay.
You can't leave the wines with too much air. It's neutral gas.
Okay, someone's asking how many cases are made for each wine. I think we've kind of touched on that already. Someone's asking, could you explain why Burgundy is more expensive than other regions, and does marketing play a part?
You know, can I answer the question, Antoine?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
I remember regarding marketing, I remember it was in the Wine Spectator, it's an American magazine. And they were taking a bottle of French wine, a bottle of American wine. And there was the split in between what's inside the bottle, the wine, the grapes, or the marketing. In our wines, 85% is wine, 15% is marketing. And in American wines, it was 85% marketing and 15 wine. So, you know, it was interesting. It was maybe 10 years ago that I read this. But why our wines are expensive is not because of marketing. It's because of the price of the land, because of the rarity of the land, and because our wines can't be replicated, are so hard to be replicated. they are unique to what they are. So I think that's the reason why they reach that level of price. And it's, remember that it's a tiny production. Burgundy accounts only for 5% of the total production of French wines. So it's really a very, very small area.
And Pinot Noir is notoriously difficult to grow as a grape.
Absolutely. Very, very demanding. Very.
Yeah.
It is very complex. It is much more complex to produce some very nice Pinot Noir because it is very fragile and much more difficult doing vinification, aging, etc. Chardonnay, if you have the right terroir and the right farming, it is easier to produce some Chardonnay. But as Thibaut explained, there's no taste like Burgundian taste when we are speaking about Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And normally when we are discussing of, if you are discussing with a Burgundian producer, we're speaking about Burgundy white wine or Burgundy red wine. We're not speaking about Chardonnay or Pinot Noir. Okay, a friend of mine, a very renowned producer in Meursault, explained that Chardonnay or Pinot Noir are only tools for us. They are the tools who help us to express the quality of the terroir. So that's why we're always speaking about terroir, about Burgundy white wine or Burgundy red wines, but we're not speaking about Chardonnay or Pinot Noir. So you can taste a lot of Chardonnay all over the world, or Pinot Noir. Some of them are very, very interesting. Some of them are very good. I'm sure, Lynne, you know much more things about worldwide wines than I do. But there's no place where Chardonnay tastes as it tastes in Burgundy. There's no comparison.
Well, I mean, Thibaut said it.
Okay.
No, I mean, Thibaut said earlier that Gevrey-Chambertin is the mecca for Pinot Noir, but I mean, I think Burgundy is absolutely the benchmark for the world in terms of absolute high quality. It's the benchmark for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay all over the world. That's what everyone who's growing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir is trying to emulate. So, I mean, it's anyway. Irish producers in Burgundy, there's a lady called Roisin Carley who's making wine in Burgundy. She's from Ballina, and she is an Irish lady making wine in Burgundy. The book is Breakfast in Burgundy by Raymond Blake, and I think it's a hungry Irishman in the belly of Burgundy, something like that. Will you be doing a wine tasting in the vineyards during the 23-1?
Why not? But we're able to make some tasting in the vineyard all along the year. It's not a big problem. We don't have to wait for a World Rugby Championship. Really not.
Okay.
we just have to wait the end of the pandemic.
And then we've got someone suggesting a book called Côte d'Or. And then someone else saying, thank you very much, Thibaut and Antoine, excellent wine, and very much appreciate your time and insight and humor. Merci beaucoup, bonne chance dans le notre nouveau monde. J'espère que vous avez un grand millésime.
Ah, thank you.
That's a nice. And why do you not get a buttery flavour from Chardonnay and Burgundy? I think you do. It depends on the wine and the village and so on. Oh, sorry, Roisin is from Ballyhonus. I beg your pardon, I apologise. Up Mayo, absolutely. Has COVID affected your business in vineyards? I don't know. We might have just 2 seconds on COVID and your business in vineyards, and then we're due to close. Has COVID affected?
Yes.
Look at Antoine, very much for him.
You know, 1/3 of my business is done with French professional buyers. So it could be direct restaurant buyers or agent or retailers who are selling only to restaurant, wine bar, etc. So as in Ireland, everything is closed for a month. So it is really difficult. So it is 1/3 of my sales. So it is very important. The other part, it was really affected during the first confinement of the 1 year ago. Today, it's easier to export some wines, even in Asia or in several places, but it is very complex. So I'm working with a lot of private consumers in France, and these people are very, very interesting because they are still buying some wine, or they are still drinking, or maybe they are drinking more than before, than the normal moment. And we are selling a lot via our website, etc., etc. So we're working a lot with private consumers, and so it takes a lot of time. We're gonna prepare, and we're gonna begin next week some private wine tasting, online tasting, like we are doing tonight, with some samples we are sending to our customers. So it is very, very, it is a really new way of discovering. So I'm in my new wine tasting room. So we've created this space 1 year ago, and I'm really impatient to receive new people in this place, really, because it is really, really too much bigger for me. It's really too big for
it looks lovely, actually. It looks very nice.
Yes, it is. I think so.
It looks lovely.
I'm
Hopefully
waiting for you and all the also. I hope we could have a wine tasting, and we are able to receive people for lunch or dinner in this place. So you're welcome. On appointment, please.
And then someone's asking about sustainability in wine production. I think we just said at the beginning, Thibaut is 100% organic certified across all of his vineyards, and Antoine has been working sustainably, but he's now in organic conversion, which takes 3 years. Someone is asking whether Brexit has affected your businesses.
Yes, very strong impact. The British have never drunk as many bottles of Burgundy as they do now. Yeah, very positive impact so far.
Well,
So
brilliant. Okay.
Probably they have to forget something about Europe. I don't know.
Okay. So lots of beautiful comments at the end. Thank you, saying that Burgundy is the gold standard of the wine world. Lovely wines, and basically, I think we have managed to get through most of the questions. Someone said we visited Burgundy on our honeymoon 10 years ago. We loved it, and have bottles of Gevrey Chambertin from that year. And basically just lots of thank yous to Antoine and Thibaut. Thank you very much, guys. What a fantastic evening with you. It was great to have you both on. I know that you're both passionately devoted to nurturing those wonderful Chardonnay and Pinot Noir vines in Burgundy. And hopefully we'll see you back in Dublin in the near future once we can get our wine festivals and things going again.
Yeah.
It's been
we'll be there.
Interesting night, and thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us. Our next tasting is a rosé tasting, which is at the end of May, and you can go online, or we'll be sending an e-zine out tomorrow for tickets to buy the rosé tasting. But again, thank you very, very much, guys. Really, really appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to the O'Brien's team who are in the background making sure that everything's working seamlessly. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. See you.
Bye.